Blood pooled as his breath grew shallow. Memories flashed of their long journey while a rain of searing lasers decimated the battlefield. Clinging to a sliver of hope for victory, reality shattered as a blade pierced his heart. Time stood still in that agonizing moment. Staring at the gaping void in his torso, his knees buckled. This was a fatal strike. He collapsed into the dirt, life fading fast. A bitter realization dawned. He would die powerless and forgotten. Through hazy vision, he stared blankly into the abyss of his final moments. Before him loomed the Liquidator, humanity's ultimate nightmare. This celestial terror had appeared from nowhere, erasing an entire continent in a single day. To fight back, a legendary vanguard was forged. Leading them was Brian Miller, the man who blocked a falling star with nothing but his shield. To the survivors, he was known by one name. The world's aegis, Brian Miller. Beside him stood great sage Bella Albright, a one-woman army. And Jacob Bloomfield, the divine archer who felled a high dragon with one arrow. Finally, the pinnacle of martial arts joined the fray. The sword saint herself, the incomparable Amy White. Then there was his team, the support unit, now nothing more than broken bodies littering the blood-soaked battlefield. Our dying hero, Gray Lee, was just a lowly foot soldier, a mere sacrificial pawn in a war between gods and legends. Watching the elites, Gray realized the World Union Academy graduates were monsters. The chasm between their strength and his was an insurmountable abyss. As they rained destruction upon the Liquidator, a bitter thought crossed Gray's mind. Was the support unit even necessary in this clash of titans? Amy blurred into motion, her blade a silver flash against the monster. Gray gritted his teeth, witnessing true power in its purest form. Seeing how little his years of training mattered compared to genius talent, tears of frustration welled in his dying eyes. The Liquidator danced through the steel until a single scratch drew blood. Amused by Amy's skill, the monster finally decided to get serious. With a blinding strike, the Liquidator severed the elites in two. Blood sprayed like a fountain as Gray watched in absolute, paralyzing horror. The monster was no longer playing. In a single heartbeat, the world's strongest fell. Gray realized the creature had been merely toying with them. Victory was impossible. Drowning in his own blood, Gray clung to consciousness, a witness to the extinction of his own kind. Minutes passed, yet his heart continued to beat despite the hole in his chest. Suddenly, a spectral voice whispered through the silence. I have found you at last. His spilled blood ignited into a divine light, revealing a destiny far greater than he ever imagined. Gray jolted awake in a realm of shadows and ancient stone pillars. Where am I? He gasped. His voice echoing in the void. Was this the afterlife? The barren landscape offered no answers, save for a mysterious figure perched upon a majestic dark throne. A horned deity clad in obsidian robes looked down, a golden sigil burning on its chest. Its face was a mask of divine indifference. You have not fallen yet, the being spoke. Gray realized his fatal wounds had vanished, his body pulsing with an eerie, renewed vitality. A screen flickered, showing his broken body. Did you save me? Gray asked. The entity shook its head. No, that power belongs to you. Gray was baffled. Even this celestial entity seemed stumped, unable to comprehend the true nature of the dormant strength residing within Gray. Your potential eclipses the Liquidators, the being promised. But only if you master it. Gray's heart raced. Then, can we actually win? The entity remained cautious. I cannot say. Do not let hope blind you just yet. But that monster must die. The entity plunged its hand into Gray's chest, igniting a brilliant blue magic circle that burned with raw authority. Accept my strength. Gray's eyes snapped open back on the battlefield. He grasped his blade, now wreathed in a terrifying swirling dark energy. This was his true essence. A power that defied common logic and remained invisible to those without the eyes to see it. Gray lunged. His blade tore through the air, shocking the Liquidator. How could a mere insect still possess such overwhelming, crushing pressure? The monster bled. Realizing he could kill it, Gray charged again with reckless abandon. Gray felt invincible, but the Liquidator merely sneered. Don't get cocky, human. Suddenly, a chill of pure dread washed over Gray. Reality warped. Gray's upper torso slid from his waist as blood erupted like a crimson geyser. He had been bifurcated in an instant. Impressive, the Liquidator mused. But then, a thick black mist swirled, birthing a masked figure that burned with the intensity of dark flames. The shadow raised a colossal black blade. Sensing a legitimate threat, the Liquidator frantically deployed his most powerful defensive barrier. As the flames ebbed, Gray's face emerged from the darkness. What are you? The monster hissed. Gray responded with a gaze of pure, icy fury. Steel clashed against the shield. With a deafening crack, the barrier shattered like glass. And Gray's blade bit deep into the monster's flesh. Are you even human anymore? The creature gasped. Gray took a heavy step forward. I'm starting to wonder that myself. Gray knew the monster's power was no joke. Yet the Liquidator was the one trembling, gasping for air in disbelief. I'll grind your soul to dust. The Liquidator spat. But Gray struck first, spraying sickly yellow ichor across the ravaged earth. Monster! The creature howled, gathering a terrifying amount of mana. A massive magic circle illuminated the sky. Your time is up, human. Gray gripped his colossal sword, unyielding as the sun was suddenly swallowed by an unnatural eternal night. The final showdown had begun. He lunged for the blind spot. Targeting the neck, his steel struck true only to shatter against the shimmering barrier. Impossible. The Liquidator sneered. Within his plane of true dusk, no mortal blade can draw blood. Cease this pathetic struggle, he mocked. Gaze upon your end, he commanded. Gray's pupils dilated as a falling star ignited the horizon, growing into a blinding, beautiful nightmare. Like a sun crashing to earth, the star struck. A cataclysmic explosion carved a crater into the world, burying our hero beneath. Dust to dust, the liquidator mused. But his victory vanished as a massive ancient magic circle erupted from the smoldering ruins. A voice resonated through the ether, sensing the massive mana surge. This power. It's enough to bridge the gap of time. Kronos, the villain hissed. The god of time ignored him, speaking to Grey. Wielder of strength, go back, reclaim your lost destiny. As the liquidator screamed in fury, Kronos offered a final gift. The rest is up to you. The grey clock began to tick. 3, 2, 1. The world is in your hands. Suddenly, Grey gasped for air. Waking on a bed of soft green grass, confusion swirled. He wasn't in a crater, but a peaceful meadow beneath a brilliant mocking sun. Was it all a dream? He turned, and his heart stopped. Renato Village. His home. The place burned to cinders 15 years ago stood perfectly intact. The realization hit like a physical blow. He had actually returned to the past. He reached out, noticing a fresh, stinging wound. This was the day Belder's gang tormented him. Not today, he growled. I won't be their punching bag ever again. Yet, doubt crept in. Back then, they were monsters to him. He sighed, fearing his victory over death was just a hallucination. He planned to train before seeking revenge, wanting to avoid useless pain. But fate is cruel, he ran straight into his bullies. Found you, little rat. Belder sneered, towering over him with 3 lackeys. You've been making it quite difficult to find you. Grey tensed. Belder kicked a sword into the dirt. Pick it up, he barked. And wipe that brain-dead look off your face. A duel? Grey refused, clutching his side. I'm injured. Let's do this once I've healed, and I'll gladly play along. Belder's grin was predatory. Don't be a coward. The blade is blunt, you won't feel a thing, he lied. Blunt or not, it's a heavy iron club, Grey countered. Shut your filthy mouth. Belder roared, his patience snapping instantly. You don't have the right to refuse. Belder screamed. Sword or fists, I'm breaking you. He charged like a rabid animal. Grey braced himself. This wasn't a mock battle, it was a cold-blooded assault on an unarmed victim. Pure, sickening malice. He remembered his future military doctor's words. Your growth was stunted by a childhood injury. This was that very moment. This was where his life as a loser truly began. Not this time. He shifted his weight, effortlessly sidestepping the strike. Belder's sword whistled through empty air. Grey paused, puzzled. Was Belder always this slow? His movements felt like a snail's. He ducked under another wild swing. It wasn't that the bully was slow, it was that Grey's soul had survived the war. Frustrated. Belda Isag. The steel grazed Grey's nose, but the hero moved with feline grace, closing the gap instantly. The truth dawned on him. He had become incredibly fast. Behind him, the 3 lackeys watched in stunned, silent disbelief. Is that really Grey? They whispered. He looked like a god of war. He gripped the sword, feeling decades of combat muscle memory. Belder leapt for a cowardly back attack. Without even looking, Grey swung his sword with his good hand, parrying with perfect precision. The impact sent a shockwave through Belder's arms. With one simple counter, Grey sent the giant bully flying backward. Is it even fair to fight an amateur like this? Grey wondered. He looked at Belder, a man who never knew mercy or pity. These trash heaps had ruined his life once. But the Grey standing here now was no longer their victim. He was their judge. Grey struck. Belder's sword spun away, clattering into the trees. Pathetic, Grey muttered. You're even worse than an amateur. You were never taught how to take a hit, were you? Grey stepped over him, mirroring the bully's own cruel, mocking words. Don't worry, Grey whispered, raising his blade. Since it's a blunt sword, it's perfectly safe, right? He slammed the iron home. Blood sprayed. Belder stared at his mangled shoulder, let out a pathetic shriek, and collapsed to his knees, sobbing like a child. Grey blinked. Even a blunt blade could kill if the wielder was strong enough. He turned his cold, murderous gaze to the others. One strike shattered Belder's nose. As the leader fell, Grey moved to the next target, his blunt edge whistling through the air. Why the screaming? Grey asked, his smile sending chills down their spines. You said blunt swords were safe. Let's keep going. Terror took hold. Kill him! Do something! Belder wailed. But the 3 lackeys were paralyzed. This Grey was a literal monster. Let's take him from behind. One shouted. They surrounded him, but Grey just smirked. Oh? You want a piece of this too? Kill him! Belder shrieked. Grey's eyes went cold. I was going to let you go, but you just signed your own death warrants. Minutes later, the forest went quiet. 4 bullies knelt in the dirt. Faces swollen and eyes shut tight, trembling in absolute submission. Grey looked at his hands. To think he once feared these bugs. You lot, you're from the Syria dojo, aren't you? Belder shrugged, claiming they'd peaked. They'd skipped training thinking they were already masters. Strong? Grey scoffed internally. If these weaklings were the standard, this dojo was a joke. Yet he needed that referral. Only those with exclusive connections could step through those doors. Belder pleaded for another source. His master's wrath over this defeat was a terrifying prospect. Grey's blade flashed menacingly near Belder's throat. The coward's face turned pale with pure dread. He bolted, screaming directions as he fled. His panicked speed left his comrades in the dust. Inside the city, Belder questioned his motive. Grey wanted that prestigious academy recommendation slot. Belder nodded, realizing the stakes. Grey's resolve was firm. The academy was his only goal. A lackey claimed Grey was already monstrous. Grey merely sighed, knowing his limits all too well. Against the liquidator, even the world's elite were fodder. Even using Kronos' power was not enough. He hadn't even scratched that monster. The path to true strength remained a desperate mystery. Belder pointed ahead. Gray remembered that brief, chilling moment when he first faced the Liquidator. He'd glimpsed control over that darkness. His mind focused on the Sword Saint's legendary teachings. With more training, the outcome could have shifted. A different fate was within his grasp. Kronos had sent him here for a reason. At the dojo, a sharp female voice greeted them. She demanded to know if these fools were bullying civilians with her sacred techniques again. They'd clearly been humiliated. The woman before them was the fierce instructor, Sarah. Belder stuttered, calling it a mock battle. Sarah's response was a swift, punishing strike. He went flying, slamming into the stone wall. The others trembled as their blood ran cold. She saw through his pathetic lies. If that was a mock battle, then so was this. She banished them forever, her blade inches from his eye. They were no longer her students. They scrambled away in terror. Turning to Gray, Sarah offered a sincere, humble apology. Gray dismissed the trouble easily. Sarah then brought up the subject of the academy recommendation. To make amends for her student's folly, she insisted on testing his true combat potential. Tossing him a wooden sword, she beckoned. Take the first move. Show me everything you have. Gray lunged. Sarah analyzed his form, noting a level of practicality far beyond his years. His movements echoed a veteran of 1,000 wars. He parried her strike with effortless grace. Belder never stood a chance. His style felt unrefined, yet it possessed a terrifying raw edge. Flashes of elite academy techniques appeared. She wondered who had truly forged this young monster. Though his skills were rough, his latent talent was like a diamond waiting to be cut. The spar reached its climax. Their wooden blades collided in a violent symphony of strikes. He didn't flinch. To her shock, the boy was actually matching her veteran pace. Her survival instinct screamed. Cold fear gripped her heart as Gray's presence intensified. His strike forced her back. She tried to dismiss it as a lucky, wild swing. She moved to end it, aiming for an opening. Instead, she was met with pure impossibility. Sarah's sword snapped in two. Gray froze, feeling that same dark, familiar surge again. The power remained, but at a cost. Agony flared through his body, forcing him down. Seo rushed to his side. Gray realized his physical vessel wasn't ready for such divinity. Struggling to stand, he masked his pain. He couldn't afford to unleash that power again. He considered explaining it to Sarah. Meanwhile, she watched him with a look of utter bewilderment. The truth was too unbelievable. He claimed he'd simply put too much force into the swing. Sarah knew wood couldn't shatter her blade. A heavy silence hung between them as she stared. Gray broke the tension. Sarah finally spoke regarding the recommendation to the Royal Academy. She refused to send him there. For a talent like his, only the World Union Academy sufficed. Gray was stunned. That was the summit, the very place where the Sword Saint was born. He doubted his own worth, asking if a nobody could truly belong there. Her cold reply shattered his hopes. It was impossible. He knew his frail body was a far cry from a swordsman's build. She admitted he might deceive the Royal Academy with parlor tricks, but the World Union Academy was different. There, fakes are devoured. How can that feeble frame hold such power? She challenged. He fell silent. He knew the Academy was a breeding ground for literal monsters. In his current state, he wasn't a contender, he was prey. As sorrow clouded his face, Sarah barked. Why are you giving up already? 9 months remained until the exam. To him, it was a heartbeat. To her, it was an eternity. Trust me, she commanded, eyes burning with conviction. Are you ready to embrace hell for 9 months? She asked. He didn't crave the pain, but his resolve was absolute. He nodded. He placed his fate entirely in her hands. A chilling smile spread across Sarah's face, her aura shifting so suddenly it made Gray's skin crawl. With a devilish grin, she whispered that his nightmare had begun. The days blurred into a cycle of brutal, relentless torment under her watch. Gray consumed strange meals and sparred until his bones screamed. Every swing of his sword was a step toward his desperate goal. 8 months passed. The frail boy was gone, replaced by a man forged in iron. Sarah realized she had nothing left to teach him. Go forth with pride, she urged. Gray was baffled. There was still 1 full month left before the gates opened. She explained that a stranger in a new land needs time to adapt. Handing him a pouch of coins, she told him to leave early. He hesitated, feeling like he was being exiled from his own home. Are you chasing me away? He asked, but she dismissed his worries. The mood shifted as Gray mentioned an ogre's nest discovered nearby. Sarah flinched. He pointed out the village's lack of defenses. She feigned indifference, claiming the royal army would handle the beasts. There's nothing to fear, she lied, her voice steady but hollow. She urged him to go, but Gray saw through the mask. He knew the truth, no army was coming to save this forgotten place. In his past life, this was the day his master died. She had charged into that nest alone and never returned. He didn't argue. He simply thanked her for everything and turned to leave, hiding the fire burning in his eyes. She watched him go with a smirk, wishing him luck. But that night, the forest turned grim as Sarah approached an eerie, blood-stained den. Following the scouts' grim trail, she found a path of gore leading straight into the heart of darkness. Going somewhere, master? A voice rang out. Gray sat perched on a branch above, a calm smile playing on his lips. Her heart skipped. What are you doing here? She hissed. You should be miles away by now. He tossed her own lie back at her, asking why the royal army hadn't arrived. Cornered, she admitted they weren't coming. I'll handle it myself, she insisted. She had calculated the risks and believed her blade alone would be enough. An elite ogre led a pack of 50. She admitted the numbers were troublesome, but she was prepared to pay the price. Gray knew the numbers weren't the problem. The danger was the leader's cunning. Getting surrounded meant certain death. It was a suicide mission. He knew if she stepped into that cave alone, the village and his master would burn. He had lived through that tragedy once before. I'm coming with you, he declared, his voice echoing with iron will. She refused, but he countered instantly. I need real blood on my blade before the academy, he argued, testing her. Do you think I'll be a burden? He asked. Sarah laughed, knowing the truth she could no longer defeat him in combat. Still, she hesitated. A real monster's den was a chaotic vortex where even the strongest could fall in a heartbeat. You lack experience, she cautioned, trying to shield him from the carnage one last time. Gray gave her an ultimatum. Either we fight together, or I'll knock you out and finish this alone. His stance was deadly serious. Silenced by his resolve, she finally relented. Just one condition. You come back alive. They exchanged a silent vow of survival. Under the pale moonlight, they crouched behind a boulder, watching the ogre colony. The terrain was a natural trap, no escape for the monsters, and no retreat for the hunters. It was all or nothing. Facing intelligent predators, Gray knew a frontal assault was madness. They had to play this perfectly. The boss was nowhere to be seen, likely lurking inside the central tent. We thin the herd first, Sarah whispered. Clear the flanks, she commanded. I'll take the center. Don't let a single one sound the alarm. They struck like lightning. Before the first ogre could even blink, Sarah's blade had already claimed its head. As the head hit the dirt, the colony erupted. Roars of fury filled the air as a green tide of monsters surged forward. Gray was a whirlwind of steel, carving through flesh with terrifying speed. Beside him, Sarah moved with lethal grace. Amidst a mountain of corpses, Sarah gasped. Is this really your first real fight? Gray didn't smile. Stay sharp, he warned. Something felt wrong. These ogres were too weak, mere decoys. The true nightmare was still waiting. As if on cue, a pair of crimson eyes ignited within the darkness of the main tent. The real hunt began now. Their gaze locked onto him, cold and predatory. Sensing the looming danger, he commanded her to flee immediately. Sarah hesitated, but the sheer terror in his eyes spoke volumes. Without a word, they bolted into the darkness. Suddenly, a massive shadow eclipsed them. An elite ogre slammed down, blocking their only path to survival. Sarah mocked the beast's arrival, thinking it the boss. Gray hissed a warning this wasn't the true nightmare. A bone-chilling roar erupted, forcing Sarah to cover her ears. Suddenly, a frenzied swarm of ogres surrounded them. Looming behind the horde was a titan. Gray recognized the monster, an ogre general, the true lord of this nest. Trapped between the elite guard and a sea of monsters, the air grew heavy with the general's crushing pressure. Reality set in for Sarah. They couldn't win this fight. Her eyes darted toward the exit, seeking any opening. We break through the front, she yelled, launching a strike. The beast deflected her blade with mocking ease. She finally drew blood, but the wound vanished instantly. Gray's voice was grim, their efforts were utterly futile. The general's war cry buffeted the pack, granting them unnatural vigor. Even a single grunt now felt like a god. Gray plunged back into the fray. Don't worry about winning, he shouted. Just buy me a few seconds. Panic flared in Sarah's chest. Gray's plan was suicide. He was going straight for the ogre general's head. A heavy axe clashed against Gray's steel. He gritted his teeth, irritated by the monsters flanking his every move. The beast lunged to disarm him, raising its weapon for a killing blow. Gray's focus remained razor-sharp on the path ahead. His blade shattered under the general's enhanced might. Recognizing the limits of his steel, he leaped back just in time. He reached for his spear, knowing it was a temporary fix. Sarah reacted instantly, tossing him her own backup blade. With dual swords in hand, Gray felt the weight of the odds. He ignored the grunts, eyeing only the general. He became a whirlwind of steel, carving through the horde. A stray claw grazed his cheek, drawing a thin line of red. Steel groaned against iron as he pushed back. More monsters closed in, their breath hot against his neck. The general's weapon surged with the foul light. Another roar echoed, and the ogre's strength reached a terrifying new peak. The beast was intelligent, it had read Gray's intent. Their weapons collided in a shower of sparks and brute force. Hurled back but unbroken, Gray charged again. He couldn't afford to waste time on the foot soldiers anymore. An ogre tackled him, pinning his arms. As another swung its axe, Gray twisted, slashing the throat of his captor. They were trying to exhaust him, using their bodies as shields. Suddenly, a massive shadow descended from above. The impact sent Gray flying. He hit the ground hard, coughing up blood as his vision began to swim. His breath came in ragged gasps. With his primary weapons gone, he was down to his very last blade. Remembering his past life, Gray knew this was the end. Run, Sarah, he urged. I'll hold them off. Sarah gave a defiant smirk while parrying a strike. And leave you to die for nothing? Not a chance. Gray promised to follow, but Sarah stumbled. Her leg was deeply gashed, painting the earth in crimson. Despair took hold. Gray hadn't regressed just to die here. His mission to destroy the liquidators was slipping away. He swung his final sword with desperate strength. It shattered, yet his spirit refused to yield to the darkness. He reached deep into his soul, searching for that forbidden power. To survive, he had to become the monster. As the ogres closed in for the kill, Gray closed his eyes. The world slowed to a rhythmic, pulsing heartbeat. His eyes snapped open, glowing with a murderous crimson light. A blade of pure shadow manifested, cleaving through the horde. Dark mist swirled around him like a shroud. Despite his terrifying aura, he offered Sarah a reassuring smile. In one fluid motion, heads rolled. The general tried to retaliate, but Gray's shadow blade cut it down instantly. The tide had turned. Sarah noticed the remaining ogres seemed sluggish, their borrowed strength completely evaporated. Without their general's buff, the monsters were pathetic. Sarah carved through them, the fear finally leaving her body. Silence fell as the last ogre collapsed. Gray apologized for the broken sword, his voice barely a whisper. You saved us, she breathed, reaching out. But before she could ask about his power, Gray's eyes rolled back. He collapsed into the dirt, unresponsive. As Sarah screamed his name, Gray's soul drifted into a void of nothingness. He stood before a colossal, chained door in the abyss. Black flames flickered, devouring the iron restraints. This was the source of his shadow power. He wondered if opening it would grant him ultimate dominion. He reached out, but a primal terror stopped him cold. He knew instinctively crossing that threshold meant certain death. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoed, praising his choice. He snapped awake, lungs burning as sweat soaked his skin. Sarah gasped in relief. He was finally back. Disoriented, he learned he'd been unconscious for 5 long days. She feared he was gone forever. Reality sank in. He had pushed his mortal limits to the breaking point. To Sarah, pushing himself was a massive understatement. Setting concerns aside, she urged him to test his strength. Gray struggled to move, but his right arm felt like lead. It wouldn't obey, sparking cold dread within him. Could he ever wield a blade again? A terrifying ink-black bruise crawled across his skin like a cursed mark. Sarah wasn't surprised. He wondered if she saw the corruption, admitting his dominant hand was now utterly useless. The damage was severe, his arm was shattered. Surprisingly, he felt no pain, only a sense of pure shock. They'd used the priceless magic potion to save him. Stunned, he learned the village chief provided the legendary medicine. Confusion swirled. Why would the chief waste such a valuable treasure on a mere commoner like him? Sarah laughed, reminding him he was their savior. Suddenly, the chief himself stormed into the infirmary. Gray offered his gratitude, but the chief shook his head, insisting the debt was truly theirs. With a trembling voice, the chief spoke of the ogre general, a beast that entire armies couldn't even scratch. Clasping Gray's hand, the chief swore that without him, the village would be nothing but ash and bone. Their very lives were a gift from Gray. Though he tried to dismiss it, the chief refused to budge. Gray fell silent. In his past life, this village was doomed. His regression had rewritten the threads of fate. The chief promised to hammer home the weight of his heroism if he still doubted his incredible worth. Hearing of Gray's academy plans, the chief asked for confirmation. Gray could only offer a stunned, hollow response. Panic set in. He had lost 5 days, leaving only 2 before the most important trial of his life. The trek was long, and a horse was his only hope. But his pockets were completely empty. He pleaded for a mount, only to find the village's finest steed already saddled and waiting for him. With this horse, time was on his side. Sarah teased that they would have dragged his sleeping body there. Blinding sunlight greeted him outside, revealing a cheering crowd gathered to send their legendary hero off to war. Joyful faces surrounded him, offering thanks. A villager stepped forward, pressing a heavy pouch into his palm. It was a collective gift. The village had pooled their gold to cover his expensive academy registration fees. Overwhelmed, Gray joked about failing. Sarah simply smiled, dismissing his humble fears with absolute certainty. Who else could claim they'd slain an ogre general? Yet, the dead weight of his right arm still haunted him. His left hand was enough, she insisted. Gray remained skeptical. The world's elite academy required more than half measures. Sarah remained unshaken. His sheer presence and raw strength would be impossible for any examiner to ignore. Her faith was contagious. With a determined grin, Gray accepted the challenge. He had no choice but to pass. In the original timeline, this place was a graveyard. Now, it thrived with life and hope. The future was changing. He had arrived. The gates of his destiny finally stood before him. He thanked his exhausted steed. Ahead, the magnificent World Union Academy rose from a shimmering lake. The host's voice boomed, signaling the start of the ticket distribution. All candidates were locked inside the arena. Thousands were gathered, yet only 20 would survive. The selection process was as brutal as war itself. Professor Ariel stepped forward. Without a word, she began manifesting the magical exam tickets for the crowd. She commanded them to grasp their fate. With a snap, blinding golden radiance engulfed the entire stadium. Tickets materialized before every student. Gray was examinee 513, designated for the fencing course. Only numbers and courses were visible. This cold, systematic approach was a hallmark of the academy's tradition. Ariel's grin was sharp. Here, status and bloodlines were worthless. Only raw talent mattered to the World Union. Only those who survived the trials would earn the right to reveal their true names to the world. Gray's brow furrowed. He lacked a sword. Yet the system perfectly identified him as a fencing master. How could a paper know his soul? Ariel revealed the truth. Assignments were based on mere appearance. Shock rippled through the crowd. She had sorted thousands in a heartbeat, relying solely on her sharp intuition. Rumors of mind-reading and secret investigations spread like wildfire among the terrified and impressed examinees. Silence fell as no one stepped forward. Satisfied that every student was correctly assigned, she moved on to reveal the looming exam schedule. Hearts raced as students checked their tickets. Gray's blood ran cold. Day 1 at 11 a.m. It was the worst possible timing. He desperately needed more time for his shattered arm to mend. Professor Ariel's voice cut through his thoughts, warning that missing this one-shot exam meant instant disqualification. No mercy, no second chances. Gray clutched his trembling arm, feeling his strength fading. He could only pray for a miracle by tomorrow morning. Dawn broke, but the miracle never came. His arm remained useless. Forced into a corner, he walked toward the arena entrance with grit in his teeth. Taking a sharp breath, he fought back the suffocating pessimism. His left arm worked, and he could barely nudge his right. It would have to be enough. He watched the ongoing matches like a hawk, dissecting the examiner's patterns. Finally, it was time. The instructor beckoned him to strike first. The first student lunged with heavy, desperate swings. But the examiner moved like a ghost, sidestepping the amateurish assault with effortless grace. In a final act of defiance, the boy swung with both hands. The examiner blocked the massive strike with a single finger, shattering the student's spirit. With a sudden flash of power, the professor blasted him back with a casual flick. The boy hit the dirt, his exam ending in total defeat. As the failed student retreated, a bitter smile touched Gray's lips. He saw the writing on the wall. He was completely outclassed. Victory felt like a distant dream. Then, his number was called. He stepped forward, dwarfed by an opponent who looked like a mountain of muscle. Ordered to initiate, Gray felt the weight of his helplessness. Yet he refused to go down without a fight. He would give everything he had. He surged forward, Sarya's voice echoing in his mind. A true sword isn't swung by arms alone, but by channeling power through the entire soul. Even with his right arm dead, he focused on driving the kinetic force of his entire body into his blade. He was a weapon in motion. His blade hissed through the air, forcing the examiner to duck. Gray's nerves sizzled. Fighting without his usual style felt like walking a tightrope. He realized then that if pure strength were easy, no one would train. The examiner suddenly countered, throwing Gray into a confused scramble. The instructor's blade was surprisingly sluggish. Gray parried, realizing that while this man had monstrous power, his speed and technique were severely lacking. If he relied on the refined arts Sarya taught him, he could bridge the gap. He could turn the examiner's brute force against him. A sharp glint returned to Gray's eyes. The path to victory was narrow, but for the first time, he finally saw it. His movements grew fluid. He confirmed the examiner was slower than he looked. He remembered his master's promise he was destined to pass. Their steel clashed in a shower of sparks. Gray held his ground, his confidence catching fire as the intense sword fight escalated. Gray lunged again, but the professor's sudden evasion reminded him of the brutal reality. The power gap was still a yawning abyss. Winning with one hand was proving to be a nightmare. However, as the duel dragged on, the examiner's movements began to turn desperate and rough. It was time for a gamble. Gray set a high-stakes trap, intentionally baiting the giant to commit to a finishing blow. The examiner took the bait, unleashing a massive wide-open swing. Gray shifted his weight, exposing himself just enough to lure the beast in. The giant swung for the kill, but Gray vanished. In a blur of speed, our hero appeared behind the examiner, catching him completely off guard. Gray knew the truth no matter the enemy's strength. A blade to the back is the ultimate equalizer. The victory was within his reach. Stop! The command echoed just as Gray's blade grazed the examiner's skin. He froze, wondering if he had truly done enough. The secondary examiner checked the clock. Time was up. Gray's eyes widened as the verdict was shouted across the arena. A draw. His sword slipped from his numb fingers. His body felt like lead, having pushed far past its limits. He walked away, shrouded in gloom. He had bled for this. If he couldn't overcome the examiners here, his future was dark. He could only hope his arm healed for a retake. He gave the arena one final, lingering look of gratitude before departing. 1 week later, at the Elite World Union Academy. In meeting room 53, the headmaster gathered the exhausted professors to deliberate on the new blood. One instructor could barely stay awake. An elder professor complained about the tediousness of the joint observation, suggesting they split the burden next year to save time. We cannot sacrifice talent for the sake of convenience, another countered, refusing to let a single hidden gem slip through the cracks. The headmaster sighed, redirecting the bickering back to the candidates. He demanded the final reports on the swordsmanship course participants immediately. The screens flickered to life. Naturally, those who managed to defeat an examiner have passed, one professor noted with a cold tone. For the rest, it came down to technical skill and surviving the 15-minute hell. He turned to the instructors for their standout picks. One name rose above the rest: candidate 5,217,753. A true monster among men. Let's stop there, another suggested. Adding anyone else would just be cruel, they'd never survive our elite curriculum anyway. The faculty nodded in silent agreement. The headmaster prepared to close the scrolls, the fate of the swordsmanship class seemingly sealed. Wait, a voice interrupted. What about candidate 513? All eyes turned to Professor Ariel, who stood with a knowing gaze. The room went silent as Gray's footage filled the screens. That little guy? One professor scoffed, watching the small frame move. On screen, Gray looked poised for a miracle. But the professors doubted him. Relying on traps rather than raw power was a dangerous path. The observers noted his technique was refined, yet his physical power was pitifully lacking. The mustachioed professor sighed, declaring Gray simply wasn't cut out for this level. Agreement rippled through the room. Professor Ariel stood frozen, her mind racing. How could so many experts have missed what lay right beneath the surface? To her, collective observation was futile if everyone was blind to the truth. The following day, Gray clutched his exam ticket with trembling hands. The moment of reckoning arrived. The swordsmanship results were finally out. Only 6 elites passed. A suffocating silence fell over the waiting crowd. Candidate 5 was called first, their ticket igniting in flames. Numbers 217, 432, and 615 followed as the pressure mounted. 753 and 925 were the last. Gray's heart sank, his number went uncalled. The victors were ordered toward the enrollment bridge. Gray stood in the shadows of their cheers, his spirit crushed. He looked utterly devastated by the bitter taste of failure. Suddenly, a final announcement echoed, the Divine Eye special admission. Seconds later, Gray's ticket burst into brilliant blue flames. Fate had other plans. Gasps filled the air. Gray stood paralyzed, his mind spinning in confusion. Sneers rose from the crowd as he heard of this mysterious category for the first time. Accusations of foul play erupted. They whispered that the World Union Academy had finally hit rock bottom. Gray's heart grew heavy as he listened. He was baffled. He had no influence here. Could his master have pulled strings behind the scenes without uttering a single word? A venerable elder silenced the critics, defending the Divine Eye legacy. He reminded them of the legendary heroes this prestigious path had forged over centuries. The crowd scoffed, mocking the recent Divine Eye picks. Amy White, Bella Albright, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield. They were all jokes to them. They called them failures, but Gray knew the hidden truth. He recognized those names, even if the others were blind to their greatness. Those failures were the legendary warriors who faced the Liquidator. Now, Gray's name was etched right alongside those titans of history. The academy bells chimed, announcing the ceremony would start in 30 minutes. After a quick change, the new class assembled at the Grand Plaza. Their uniforms featured a striking black crest of the academy symbol. Our protagonist looked remarkably sharp and ready for battle. Early arrivals scanned the empty plaza, wondering if they were lost. Suddenly, a man dashed toward them, breathless and offering profuse apologies for the delay. He politely asked them to clear space for the grand staircase. The students complied, unsure if their new position was out of the way. Perfect, the man murmured, dropping to one knee. As his palm touched the earth, a massive glowing magic circle erupted. The earth groaned and shifted. Jaws dropped in disbelief as a full, magnificent structure ascended from the ground like a rising mountain. He casually invited them to find a seat. It was high-level teleportation magic, an incredible feat of moving an entire building across space and time. Gray took a seat, realizing the school wanted to flaunt its architectural majesty. It was a display of absolute, overwhelming power. Such a lavish use of teleportation was unheard of. Gray's excitement flared. The World Union Academy was proving to be a true powerhouse. Confusion rippled through the 30 accepted students. There were far too many seats for such a small elite group of warriors. A fellow student expressed shock at her ignorance. With an apologetic smile, she admitted her life had been nothing but the sword until now. She explained that the academy gathered the world's absolute pinnacle of talent. Then, she gestured toward the horizon with a knowing look. Majestic aircraft and dragons dominated the heavens. Gray stared as the legendary magic airship, the Strato Queen, descended through the clouds with regal power. He had boarded this behemoth during the Liquidator subjugation. It was a floating fortress, renowned as one of the world's greatest aerial vessels. Using such a titan for a ceremony was pure extravagance. The academy was shattering every expectation Gray had ever held. The airship docked, and the full assembly was complete. After a long droning speech from the headmaster, Gray struggled to stay focused. To him, the pomp was no different from any mundane school. But then came the greetings from the top-ranked students of each discipline. Leonhardt, the undisputed ace of swordsmanship, was summoned to the stage. Whispers followed him like a shadow as he walked with predatory grace. Rumor said he had crushed the examiner in a heartbeat. Some claimed his skills already rivaled the very professors who taught them. This was the genius Leonhardt Appius. Gray watched intently. Reaching the podium, Leonhardt asked the headmaster for permission to speak his mind. Granted leave, he thanked them coldly. He then declared he had a serious grievance to air with the prestigious institution. First, he acknowledged those who had fought their way in through blood, sweat, and the proper, rigorous examination process. He called it an honor to stand among such peers. He urged them to become legends who would truly shape the world's future. He encouraged unity in their pursuit of greatness. However, his voice turned sharp as he claimed some among them were unworthy of the uniform. He turned his piercing gaze toward Professor Ariel, demanding her confirmation. She was visibly shaken. She countered that everyone present had survived grueling trials, and that exclusion was a dangerous path to walk. She questioned his motives, but Leonhardt's glare intensified. He clarified he wasn't targeting those who earned their place through the front door. He spat out the truth. He was talking about the backdoor student she admitted through the Divine Eye. He roared for the special admittee to show himself, return the uniform, and leave in disgrace. A suffocating tension gripped the entire plaza. Gray was baffled by such sudden hostility. Then it hit him Leonhardt had been sitting right beside him. Fortunately, the genius hadn't recognized him yet. He stayed silent, hoping to avoid the center of this storm. Yet Professor Ariel simply smirked, noting the fiery spirit of this year's batch. Leonhardt's pride was wounded. Fed up with being ignored, he barked at her to stop smuggling failures through the back door. She met his gaze with chilling silence. Then, in a flash, she whispered a lethal question. Did he truly believe he was the stronger one? That sudden movement sent a shockwave through the arena. Caught completely off guard, Leonhardt could only grit his teeth in frustration. He claimed superiority, questioning if she dared to challenge him. Amused by his bravado, Ariel proposed a bet that piqued his interest. The stakes were insane, her career against the boy's future. Gray watched, confused, as Leonhardt asked if he had to fight the rookie. Ariel scoffed, calling such a match dull. She coldly added that if Gray actually unleashed his true power, Leonhardt would be dead. She claimed a teacher's duty was to prevent fatalities. Leonhardt's veins pulsed with fury at the insult, but she merely stated the facts. Instead, she suggested a hunt. Since Leonhardt was better at slaughtering monsters than dueling people, a beast-slaying bet was perfect. He glared, hating how well she read him. Fine, he spat, demanding to know the rules of this twisted game. They would each hunt a beast of her choosing. With every round, the monsters would evolve, and the first to fail would lose everything. If Gray failed, Ariel would resign and the specials would be expelled. But if Leonhardt lost, he would become her personal puppet. She dared him to accept. Wary of a trap, Leonhardt demanded to know their prey before committing his fate to her whims. After a mocking pause, she named their first target, an ogre general. She then teased him, asking if that was too easy. The class froze in terror, but Gray remained eerily calm. While he wondered about her choice, Leonhardt's rage reached a boiling point. He roared that soloing an ogre general was suicide. Ariel calmly clarified they had time, the hunt wasn't happening today. She gave them 1 year. Leonhardt snapped, shouting that if disaster-class monsters were that easy to kill, the world wouldn't be suffering. He demanded a realistic target. Gasping for air, he stopped mid-sentence as the true nature of her scheme dawned on him. He realized she chose an impossible goal to ensure a draw. Refusing to be a pawn, he declared he wouldn't play her game. Ariel's smirk widened as she added a final twist. In the event of a draw, Leonhardt would be declared the absolute winner. If Gray couldn't slay the beast, Ariel would vanish and the students would be gone. She leaned in, asking for his final answer. He looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. The bet felt like a trap. Yet her silence beckoned him to sign his soul away. No cheap tricks, he warned. It must be a prime beast. She agreed, summoning a magical feather pen with a flick of her wrist. The blood-red terms were already etched into a magic contract. She invited him to sign if he truly had the courage. He inked his name, unable to resist. Still, he asked if she really believed the kid could win. Her reply was a cryptic. Who knows? She retreated to her seat in silence. Nearby, the other professors whispered, convinced Ariel had finally tipped over the edge. Some whispered it was a complex suicide mission for her career. Gray stood frozen. The die was cast and the bet was official. One detail haunted Gray. She had mentioned his past kill despite the year-long deadline. She watched him now, her eyes unreadable. Gray realized the trap had snapped shut long ago. As their eyes locked, she pressed a finger to her lips, demanding his silence. That was the moment Gray knew she was a master of dirty play. Soon, the ceremony ended and the first magic lecture began. Students were stunned by the immediate workload, but at this elite academy, every second was a battle for survival. The professor wasted no time, diving straight into the fundamentals of mana manipulation. It was the bedrock of all power. He explained ether, the raw energy flowing through their magic circuits. Gray listened intently as the professor mapped out the soul's veins. Though he feared falling behind, Gray realized this was exactly like his hellish boot camp. He was safe, or so he thought. Fate was cruel, he was in Leonhardt's class. He prayed the blonde hothead wouldn't realize he was the legendary Divine Eyes recruit. The professor's sharp eyes caught Gray drifting. He barked a reprimand, offended that a student was bored 5 minutes in. Gray jumped, shocked he'd been spotted from the very back row. He bowed his head quickly, offering a hurried apology. The professor sneered, challenging the boy to prove his confidence. He taunted Gray, demanding he demonstrate basic magic for the class. Gray calmly argued that as a swordsman, he didn't think mastery of spells was a requirement for his path. The professor countered that even a master of the blade must understand ether to effectively coordinate with battle mages. Feeling the flow of a spell is vital. Gray was stunned. The lecture was an exact echo of his brutal training days. He wondered if the magic would be the same too. He spoke up, asking if they were about to practice the ether bullet. The professor's interest was piqued. When Gray confirmed he knew it, he felt a surge of relief that boot camp hadn't been in vain. Sensing an opportunity for a show, the professor called upon Leonhardt. He knew Leon was already a master of the ether bullet. Leonhardt stood proudly, boasting of his dual training in sword and spell. He warned that for any normal student, a duel would be lethal. Yet the professor remained unfazed. He claimed that despite their massive power gap, they were merely utilizing basic ether bullets. No lives were at risk, and he had no intention of asking Leonhardt to hold back. Then, the professor dropped a bombshell. He announced Gray as this year's Divine Eye student. Every gaze locked onto Gray, who realized he was in deep trouble. With a devilish smirk, the professor exposed the truth. Leonhardt's gaze turned icy, vowing to show Gray the true hierarchy of power. He intended to teach Gray the academy's brutal reality. Leonhardt glared intensely, commanding the boy to step forward and face him. They stood eye to eye. The professor declared that upon his signal, they would both unleash their ether bullets at one another. Gray had only a few days of bootcamp training. Though promised it wasn't fatal, he knew the pain would be real. The signal echoed. Leonhardt was desperate to prove his dominance, leaving Gray no choice but to throw caution to the wind. Leonhardt conjured a faint blue orb. But as Gray channeled his mana, a massive, radiant sphere of energy surged before him. Silence fell as every face froze in shock. Even our main character stood stunned. Gray's ether bullet completely overpowered Leonhardt's. A scream tore from Leonhardt's throat. Reacting instantly, the professor cast a protective barrier to shield his falling student. Relief was short-lived. To everyone's horror, the barrier shattered like glass, and the impact sent Leonhardt flying backward. A violent gale and blinding radiance erupted. Nearby students recoiled as Leonhardt crashed down with a pained, guttural shriek. The professor rushed over, checking for life. Leonhardt struggled up, claiming he was fine. The professor exhaled a heavy sigh. He then turned his gaze toward Gray. He realized that without that barrier's intervention, Leonhardt might have met a lethal end. Shockingly, not even a professor could manifest such raw power. He stared at Gray, demanding to know what he'd just done. Gray was baffled. Leonhardt's spell felt so fragile, it did not even seem like the same magic he had been practicing. He wondered if his training was different. Was the magic learned in the subjugation squad truly a different beast altogether? The professor shook his head. It was definitely an ether bullet. However, the quality of Gray's ether was on another level. This wasn't standard mana. It was supercompressed ether, a concept the other students had never even heard of before. The professor confessed even they struggled to control such force. Yet, Gray had effortlessly shaped it into a perfect spell. He declared that no one else in the entire academy possessed such talent. Murmurs and whispers began to flood the room. Never had they witnessed such destructive force. Some now believed the Divine Eye admission was justified by this terrifying power. Some argued Gray belonged in the magic course. But within Gray's mind, a sense of deep unease began to settle. Every spell from the Subjugation Squad boot camp was like this. Even there, he was considered nothing more than average. He asked if this was a joke, believing anyone could do this. The professor suddenly erupted into a fit of laughter. Gray's confusion grew as the laughter intensified. Then, the professor lunged forward, grabbing his shoulders with an intense burning gaze. He urged Gray to join the magic course, offering his personal recommendation. Gray's magical genius far eclipsed his swordsmanship. Gray declined politely, citing he'd always been told he was talentless. The professor looked at him as if hearing a joke. He couldn't grasp how Gray felt untalented while wielding compressed ether. He hailed Gray as a once-in-a-generation genius. He called him a true prodigy of the academy. Whoever claimed he lacked talent clearly possessed no eyes for greatness. He pressed again, asking if Gray was truly sure. This professor was notorious for never handing out a single compliment. The students stood paralyzed. Such high praise was unheard of. He kept insisting that wasting such talent was a crime. Gray laughed nervously, but then a memory surfaced. He finally recalled exactly where he'd heard of this compression technique before. In his past life, a mentor explained that ancients didn't know Odd, the life force, even existed within their bodies. Casting magic was a nightmare back then. They had to endlessly compress ether, praying it would eventually fuse with Odd. A golden-eyed woman with blue hair had called that process laughable. Now, Gray asked the professor if he'd heard of Odd. The professor's bewildered face said it all. This era was still ignorant of Odd. Gray realized the magnitude of his situation. His bootcamp training was actually knowledge from the future. He knew he had to guard this secret with his life. Returning to the offer, the professor asked again about the transfer. Gray offered a deep respectful bow and apologized. He declared his unwavering love for the sword. Despite the generous offer, he had to decline. The professor reluctantly accepted, but he told Gray the door was always open if he changed his mind. Gray offered his most sincere, humble thanks. Dismissing him to his seat, the professor added he'd no longer scold Gray for his boredom during these basic lectures. These lessons were child's play for a genius. As students marveled, Leonhardt watched, clutching his chest in sudden, overwhelming awe. Blushing deeply, Leonhardt gazed at Gray with admiration, calling him Lord Gray. Later, Gray received a mysterious letter from Professor Ariel. Caught off guard by the sudden summons, Gray suspected Professor Carlos. Perhaps she intended to force him into the magic course. Approaching her office, he hesitated. Before his hand could reach the door, Ariel's voice echoed. "Come in, it is not locked." He stepped inside only to face a sudden strike. With effortless grace, Gray parried the blow, leaving the young attacker frozen. His body had moved purely on survival instinct. Just as he opened his mouth to demand answers, her face left him speechless. She looked hauntingly familiar. From across the room, Ariel smirked, her eyes gleaming. Gray had just proven her intuition was absolutely flawless. Was Bella holding back? The man questioned, wondering if Ariel had secretly ordered her to go easy on the mysterious boy. Her form was perfect, yet she'd been disarmed in a heartbeat. Hearing that name, Gray's blood ran cold. It was Bella Albright, the future Grand Sorceress herself. Ariel could only scoff at the men's clueless chatter regarding the girl's legendary potential. "If you cannot recognize true talent, resign as professors," Ariel snapped. The men quickly retreated, claiming it was all a joke. Coins changed hands as the bet was settled. Gray stood baffled. What kind of madness were these professors actually plotting? Ariel revealed they'd bet on his survival. Since he'd succeeded, she tossed him a heavy bag, his fair share of the gold winnings. His eyes widened at the gleaming gold coin of fortune. The other professor conceded that the boy was exactly as she promised. They noticed he'd avoided using his dormant arm, shielding it like a precious weakness. Was it a lingering physical injury, they wondered? It was not a mere muscle tear, it felt like a deeper, permanent scar. A simple wound would not cause such stillness. Gray was stunned by their keen perception. We wouldn't be academy professors if we couldn't see through a student's basic secrets. Professor Ariel had already sensed his condition during the entrance exams. With a sharp gaze, she dismissed the others, her curiosity satisfied. "He is my student," she declared possessively. The professors admitted his potential, yet warned that his wound might still mean failure. "Keep that in mind," they warned, before vanishing into the shadows, leaving Gray alone with the formidable Professor Ariel. With the pests gone, Ariel pivoted to magic over tea. Word of his compressed ether in Carlos's class had already reached her. Gray hadn't expected the news. Carlos had actually begged Ariel to transfer the boy to the magic department immediately. Naturally, she refused. To her eyes, he was a master of the blade, not magic. Gray found her assessment truly surprising. He showed no signs of magical cultivation. Gray felt exposed. Her ability to read his lack of practice was truly terrifying. Realizing honesty was his only path, he confessed. Intrigued, Ariel promised secrecy and a handsome reward for his hidden methodology. She needed the truth for Bella's future. After all, the girl was destined to become the realm's legendary great sorceress. Bella was a theoretical genius but struggled with application. For some mysterious reason, the art of ether compression remained beyond her. Without compression, her true power remained locked. Gray recalled rumors from his past. Bella was known as a late bloomer. Ariel noted that according to Carlos, Gray had manifested compressed ether without ever actually performing the physical compression process itself. If such a shortcut existed, Bella could avoid Varian Bradley. Gray's heart skipped. He knew that name all too well. "Varian Bradley?" he asked. Ariel nodded. In this world, his name was synonymous with infamy, madness, and pure dread. A monster who performed horrific human experiments and triggered disasters that wiped out cities. He was history's worst magic criminal. History's most reviled criminal was still walking free. Gray could not believe the villain had not been caught in this era. If Bella failed to master compression by year's end, she'd be handed to Varian for a forced, experimental surgery. The horror hit Gray. Ariel agreed. Under the guise of enhancement, it was nothing more than cruel human experimentation. Shadows of his victims whispered through the academy. Rumors spoke of those who died or were left shattered by his treatments. It is terrifying, Bella whispered, her voice trembling. Yet expulsion and Varian's table were the only fates awaiting her now. Ariel preferred Bella quit rather than face that butcher. Little did she know, Gray held secrets from a future yet unwritten. Altering the timeline was a heavy burden. But seeing Bella's fear reminded him of his own past helplessness against destiny. If he could erase a hellish future, then breaking the rules of time was a small price. He would intervene. I will teach you, he promised. At dusk they would meet. He began scrawling revolutionary concepts across the chalkboard. He laid bare forbidden magical truths, demanding their silence. Ariel gave her word his secrets would be guarded with her life. They bound their souls in a deadly magic contract. With the seal complete, Gray asked for their thoughts on his revelation. Ariel was stunned. The concept of OD was revolutionary. Bella marveled at how complex magic was so perfectly and elegantly organized. It felt like a divine lecture from the future. His explanation had just propelled magical history forward by 100 years. Ironically, he was merely reciting her own future teachings. To them, it sounded like the wisdom of a distant enlightened age. Ariel sat stunned. The depth of this information was simply beyond her current capacity to judge. Questioning the validity, she turned to Bella. The genius mage confirmed the logic was sound and defied no mystical laws. Action was the only proof. They were here to witness if Gray's radical concepts could actually breathe life into a spell. Scanning the manuscript, Bella's brow furrowed before her staff ignited, channeling her raw essence to demonstrate the theory's full potential. Legend claimed her unchecked mana could incinerate entire cities. Control was her only weakness, a volatile storm waiting to be unleashed. Suddenly, the atmosphere vibrated. Before he could react, Bella's mana surged beyond her comprehension, reaching a violent, eruptive breaking point. A pillar of pure ether pierced the heavens. No one expected such a monstrous display of raw, overwhelming magical pressure. If she hadn't mastered the runaway energy at the final millisecond, Gray would have been erased. She was his true savior. Bella beamed, molding her magic into a playful dragon before exhaustion claimed her. Her ether spent, she drifted into deep sleep. As Gray panicked, Professor Ariel remained calm. The girl had simply drained her reserves and needed rest to recover her soul. Sighing in relief, Ariel marveled at the feat. Constructing magic on such a massive scale in mere moments was absolutely miraculous. Even in her dreams, Bella credited the theory. It allowed her to compress ether into a state of absolute density effortlessly. Gray smiled, knowing it was her own future wisdom. Ariel rejoiced. This breakthrough meant that dangerous surgery was no longer necessary. She resolved to cancel the procedure immediately. Above all, she was grateful Bella's delicate mana control remained perfectly intact. When Gray inquired, Ariel explained the trade-off. Variant surgery boosts power, but it utterly shatters a mage's fine motor control. By forcibly breaking one's limiters, the soul is scarred. Gray realized the legendary sorceress's tragedy was born from this forbidden ritual. Ariel acknowledged the truth. Without Gray's guidance, Bella would have never achieved this divine level of super-compressed ether. The debt was finally paid. Now, it was time for the professor to uphold her end of their secret bargain. Summoning glowing butterflies, she began her craft. They danced around Gray's arm as she gently touched his weathered hand. Warmth flooded his limb as the magic peaked. Testing his grip, Gray gasped, his hand moved with fluid, forgotten ease. Potions had failed him, leaving Gray stunned. Ariel merely scoffed, claiming her nerve restoration arts far surpassed any common alchemical brew. Gazing at his hand, she urged him to test his limits. Pick up your blade, she suggested with a knowing smile. Gray stepped back and drew his sword. He swung repeatedly, but a strange hollowness lingered. The rhythm felt slightly off. Ariel watched him closely. Nerves could be mended, she explained, but the deep scars on his soul remained unhealed. Modern scholars deny the soul's existence, yet Ariel knew better. Her unique eyes could see the ethereal truth clearly. His spirit was mending slowly. Wary of the cost, Gray asked if he should abandon his grueling training sessions entirely. Ariel disagreed, curious about his path. What kind of forbidden swordsmanship could possibly inflict such profound damage upon the soul? He remained silent. She noted that only legendary styles, which use the soul as a catalyst, produce such devastating effects. She invoked the name of Amy White. Gray froze. Why was the future sword saint being mentioned in this era? Ariel sensed a familiar echo in his stance. Your movements, she remarked, carry the distinct, masterful shadow of Amy's style. Reflecting further, she noticed a gap. His master's prowess seemed to eclipse even the current skills of the legendary sword saint. She predicted it would take years before Amy could even dream of matching the mastery Gray already displayed today. Astonished by her intuition, Gray feigned humility. He claimed his skills were merely the product of a rural hometown dojo. He quickly pivoted the conversation. If this interrogation continued, his secrets from the future would surely come spilling out. He asked if any blade could harm the spirit. Ariel shook her head. Ordinary martial arts possessed no such power. No mere mortal could fell an ogre general and its entire vanguard with a single devastating stroke of the blade. She knew his secret. Ariel had witnessed the aftermath, a magnificent scene that proved her victory in their wager. Not even peak sorcery could replicate that destruction. It was clear. Gray was tapping into a mysterious, hidden authority. When asked if she truly saw it, she nodded. She could see power seeping through a heavily chained-in door. He remembered that very door. Her insight wasn't guesswork. She truly possessed the eyes to peer into his very essence. She had encountered a similar aura before. Though not identical, the unsettling vibe reminded her of other powerful entities. When Gray asked if others existed, Ariel hesitated. She wasn't even certain if those beings were truly human. She called them liquidators. Gray's blood ran cold. That name shouldn't have been spoken for many years to come. Ariel noted his shock. In this age, knowledge of those shadows was supposed to be a closely guarded secret. Attributing his knowledge to future magic, she shrugged. Gray laughed inwardly. She was right, though she didn't realize how literally. He confirmed the danger. They were a catastrophic threat to all mankind, a nightmare that had to be stopped immediately. If redemption is out of reach, total annihilation is our only option. She recoiled at his ruthlessness, yet couldn't deny the looming threat he posed. Unfazed, Vian pushed forward with his twisted research. Gray demanded to know the professor's true connection to this madness. The question caught her off guard. Then, the bombshell. The liquidator was the very entity he sought to summon. Gray stood frozen in shock. The revelation that the liquidator was man-made shattered his assumptions. It explained why the Academy knew its exact arrival point during the last encounter. The chilling truth dawned on him: the Academy was complicit. This experiment ends now, he roared, a sentiment Professor Ariel grimly echoed. Tragically, since the mastermind held equal rank, she lacked the legal power to dismantle his laboratory or halt his dark ambitions. Her pleas to the elders fell on deaf ears. Gray's eyes narrowed as he questioned the identity of these shadowy superiors. Even those names were classified. Without a direct decree from the High Council, the forbidden ritual would proceed completely unchecked. Frustration boiled over as the trail went cold. The Academy's corruption ran deeper than imagined. Yet, if a criminal pulled the strings, the game changed. In his past life, Vian's atrocities claimed 10,000 souls. Most importantly, Gray knew the location of his secret slaughterhouse. Gray proposed a sting operation to catch the villain in the act. But Ariel shook her head. Justice wasn't that simple in this world. Trespassing into a professor's sanctum was a capital offense. Without a warrant, they would be the ones facing the executioner's block. Without undeniable proof, they were walking into a trap. "Do you have evidence?" she asked. Gray's silence was heavy with frustration. The discussion hit a dead end. Gray looked at Ariel, realizing she was just as trapped by the system's red tape as he was. He nodded in grim understanding. Suddenly the mood shifted. "Tell me," Ariel whispered. "Do you wish to master the volatile power within you?" His heart raced. Could she truly help? She spoke of a legendary master, a specialist in taming the world's most chaotic and primordial forces. Heathcote Longfellow. The name sent shivers down his spine. The man who forged the Sword Saint. Ariel smiled, seeing the fire ignite in Gray's eyes. A private session was set for dawn. Joy surged through him. Mastering this absolute power was his sole reason for entering these hallowed halls. Success came quickly. But at dawn, Heathcote didn't offer a lesson. He launched a devastating surprise attack. Training with a legend was a dream, but why were they sprinting through the wilderness? Confusion clouded his mind as the forest blurred past. Heathcote sensed his distraction. "If you can think, you can run faster," he barked. "Focus. Your wandering mind is a liability on the battlefield." The command was simple: run until your very soul screams for mercy. Listen well. Only when your mortal shell is utterly spent will your true soul power finally awaken from its deep slumber. Until his stamina hit zero, swords would remain sheathed. "Yes, master," Gray shouted, trusting the unconventional methods of this legendary warrior. Yet, guilt gnawed at him. While he ran circles, Vian was busy summoning the Arbiter. Was he wasting precious time on these endless laps? A week passed. Gray reported his progress to Ariel. "How goes the hellish training?" she asked with a knowing glint in her eye. It was endless cardio with a hint of steel at the finish. Yet, he couldn't deny the raw strength surging through his limbs. She chuckled at the predictability of the old master. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed, and a courier delivered a sealed, urgent missive. As Ariel scanned the parchment, her face contorted into a mask of pure horror. Gray grabbed the letter, his own expression turning equally grim. The report claimed Bella had successfully mastered super-compressed ether. She had manifested a divine power that mimicked the legendary force perfectly. But it was a farce. Analysis proved no actual compression occurred. Her new ability was a hollow imitation, disqualified from the official records. The contract stood. The forced surgery was back on schedule. Vian Bradley's signature mocked them. Gray's blood turned to ice-cold fury. "This is madness," he screamed. Ariel realized Vian was hell-bent on the operation, regardless of whether Bella actually needed the procedure. "Can't she refuse?" "The contract is a shackle," Ariel sighed. "Unless Vian relents, she faces either the surgeon's blade or permanent exile." Gray's knuckles whitened. Ariel looked him in the eye. "I need your strength." Exposing Vian's crimes would shatter the contract. "Where is his lab?" she demanded. Gray paused, then a predatory smile spread across his face. "You said it was too dangerous without proof," he reminded her. "Then we'll find it together," she replied, betting everything on him. She should have trusted him from the beginning. Her intuition knew he spoke the truth. It just took her pride this long to catch up. "Lead the way. We end this now." Gray revealed the hidden location, a mountain fortress nestled near the remote village of Torowell. The official lab? Gray couldn't fathom the audacity, committing unspeakable crimes right under the Academy's nose in a sanctioned facility. It was the perfect hideout. In a sanctioned lab, no one questions your long hours or the secrets hidden within the shadows. Academy etiquette forbade interference, but evidence of his heresy would grant them immunity. Their break-in would be hailed as a heroic intervention. A soft knock broke the tension. Enter, Ariel commanded, her voice steady and resolute. Bella clutched her own copy of the letter, trembling. Ariel took the paper, promising to handle the darkness herself. Bella looked up, confused. Are you going to fight him for me? She whispered. Are you really planning to face that monster all alone? Professor Ariel smirked with cold confidence, claiming her power alone sufficed. But Gray stepped forward, refusing to let her face the darkness without him. Bella insisted on joining, for this burden was hers to bear. She warned that challenging an academy professor was a dance with death. He is a lunatic driven by forbidden human trials. One slip, and they would become mere playthings in his house of horrors. She couldn't bear to lose them, but Gray countered that isolation only invited a swifter demise. With the same devastating strength that felled the ogre general, he vowed to be her ultimate shield. If Ariel fell, Gray's future would vanish. He begged her to let them seize control of their own destiny. The professor yielded with a heavy sigh, sensing their unshakable resolve. She granted them passage on one final condition. Survival must be their absolute priority above all else. They nodded, their silent oath sealed in the moonlight. Deep within the mountain shadows lay a cursed laboratory. Bella gasped. Unable to believe the depravity hidden within Varian's sanctuary, Ariel confirmed the grim reality as they moved to secure proof. Gray sensed the heavy stench of corruption ahead. Trusting them was easy, yet Bella's heart raced. Could they truly infiltrate this den of monsters without a soul-crushing cost? Varian was supposedly at a conference, leaving the lair vacant. However, the entrance likely crawled with lethal, arcane traps. Their only path was a violent breach through the side. Bella hesitated at the crime, but Ariel knew they had already crossed the line. The die was cast. Ariel offered them a final chance to retreat, though her own path was set in stone. Before the plunge, Bella questioned why a professor would risk everything for a student like her. Gray spoke of a grander fate. If Varian's experiments continued, the entire world would be sacrificed to his madness. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Ariel agreed this monster had to be stopped at any cost. Their lives were not on hold, they were fighting for the future. Ariel surged forward, summoning a magnificent storm of magic circles. A thunderous explosion shattered the laboratory walls. Gray watched in awe, realizing the professor's true, overwhelming power. Through the settling dust, a nightmare unfolded. A dark abyss appeared, lined with row upon row of cold iron cells. Living skeletons hung in chains, their bodies broken and bleeding from Varian's sadistic curiosity. One look was enough to turn Ariel's blood to ice. Evidence was everywhere, written in the suffering of countless souls. The professor counted 14 forbidden spells etched into the stone, each a crime punishable by eternal imprisonment. The unauthorized human trials were beyond redemption. As they ventured deeper, a sinister altar caught their gaze. Panic seized Bella's heart. They came for proof, but how could they leave these innocent people to rot? Time was a luxury they didn't have. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed from the shadows, answering their silent prayers. It was Varian, defying the conference with a magical double. The realization hit them like a physical blow. His true work was here, requiring fresh materials to fuel his twisted evolution of magic. He gestured to the corpses in the cells, but his hunger had shifted. Chills raced down their spines as he smiled. He craved subjects with superior potential. Somehow, he had caught wind of their arrival and set the perfect trap. In this isolated silence, they could vanish without a trace. No one would ever suspect the esteemed professor. Ariel realized they were his next lab rats. Varian promised her sacrifice would push the boundaries of magic forever. He prepared to harvest them like cattle. Suddenly, a massive fireball tore through the darkness, aimed at his heart. The explosion rocked the facility. Bella had struck first, yet Varian emerged from the smoke, unscathed and amused. He praised Ariel's enduring edge while marveling at Bella's exceptional, raw talent. The special admission student was a rare find. Still, he was unimpressed by her desperate, childish stunt. Assassinating a professor was a fool's errand. But Bella snarled that killing was her only path to survival. Ariel ordered an immediate retreat. They had the evidence, now the Academy's full might would descend upon him. Varian wouldn't let his prizes escape so easily. He unleashed a sphere of black flames toward Bella. Ariel shielded her just in time, but the gluttony flame began devouring her magic like a parasite. This cursed fire consumed defensive spells as fuel. In theory, no barrier in the world could hold it back. Ariel's shield groaned and shattered. She activated her divine eye, pouring her very life force into a second barrier. The new shield cracked instantly. She thrust the memory pouch at Gray, screaming for him to flee at once. Bella slammed her staff into the ground, erupting a massive shimmering field that engulfed them all. Ariel ordered her to run, but Bella stood her ground. She would hold the line no matter the cost. Ariel reminded them of their ironclad vow. If disaster struck, their lives had to come first, no exceptions. Sensing Varian's twisted magic, she knew defense was futile. Go, she urged. I'll buy you every precious second. Her barrier shattered mid-sentence. Fear gripped her, but Bella stepped forth, her magic clashing violently against the hungry flames. Shielding them, Bella scoffed. The spell wasn't invincible, it just required a specialized, forgotten form of counter magic to neutralize. Varian recoiled in shock. How could she know the secret counter to gluttony flame? Who told you? He snarled. I just learned a new theory. She replied coolly. This spell is child's play. Enraged, Varian's face twisted with fury. Who is the traitor? He roared. Tell me now, and I might grant you the mercy of a painless death. Bella merely flashed a teasing smile. You want to know my teacher? She whispered playfully. Sorry, but that's a secret. Hinting at a mere swordsmanship student, she watched Gray. He'd simply pieced the complex theory together like a puzzle. Veins pulsed on Varian's forehead at her mockery. Grabbing a crimson crystal, he roared that they would all burn. He crushed the gem, releasing wailing souls. This potent dark magic surged forward, swallowing them in an abyss of shadow. Gray called out in concern, but Bella's barrier held. Varian laughed, knowing her mana would dry up in mere moments. With only a minute of mana left, Bella made a desperate call. Professor Ariel, strike now? I'll handle the defense. Ariel didn't hesitate. Her eyes glowed, pinpointing a weakness in the flames. She focused her mana, projecting it beyond the barrier. Channeling her power, she built a surge of lightning magic. It struck like jagged blades before flickering out against the heat. Varian mocked their struggle. Your pathetic sparks can't even reach me. Despair began to cloud Professor Ariel's focused expression. Gray realized the grim truth. Ariel's offense was her weakest link. The gluttony flame was simply devouring her spells whole. What now? Bella gasped, her mana nearly gone. Ariel sighed, regretting they hadn't fled while they still had the chance. Suddenly, Gray stepped forward. Leave it to me. Bella stared, confused. How could a sword reach across that inferno? I'm sure, he declared. Ariel's voice trembled. Gray, if you use that power again, the backlash might actually kill you. Even if he survived, his arm was at risk. Better I fall alone, Gray countered, than let us all perish here. He dropped into a low stance. Amidst the black fire, a terrifying red light flared. Before Varian could react, Gray vanished. In a flash of steel, Varian's head flew high, blood spraying the air. Gray stood still, his eyes cold and unwavering. A haunting silence followed. Bella stood frozen as Varian's headless corpse collapsed, his severed head rolling across the floor. Ariel stood paralyzed. To finally witness that legendary power with her own eyes. It was as terrifying as it was beautiful. The ceiling groaned, raining debris upon them. Quickly, Ariel wove a spell, suspending the falling stones in mid-air to protect them. That was beyond words, Ariel whispered, checking on him. Gray, are you hurt? He let his sword slip from his fingers. His hands shook violently. My dominant arm is numb and burning, he admitted. But I can still move it. I'm okay. Switching his blade to his other hand, he nodded. Ariel saw the fruits of his brutal training. His endurance was incredible. Had this been his past self, that single strike would have left him bedridden for weeks, unable to even crawl. Now, it was just a dull ache. His hellish training had paid off. He was finally strong enough to change fate. Ariel watched him, her gaze heavy with gratitude. It's because of you, Gray. Because of you, we're still breathing. She apologized for the burden he carried. Gray shook his head. Don't be. I'm the one who chose to stop him. She thanked him again, pleading for him to seal that power away. Using it again could cause permanent, irreversible damage. Her genuine worry caught him off guard. Seeing her concern, he gave a quiet nod of understanding. He would be careful. Bella broke the silence, her eyes wide. Was that magic? I didn't sense even a single drop of ether. It defied all logic. Ariel stepped in, her voice firm but polite. Bella, do not ask. For your own sake, stop. She forbade Bella from speaking of it. I cannot guarantee your safety, Ariel warned, if the wrong people find out. Memory erasure was the only other option. Understanding the gravity, Bella immediately offered a binding magic contract. Ariel agreed. Once the seal was set, Gray turned toward the victims. He couldn't ignore the horrific experiments conducted in the shadows. They were trapped in a magical slumber. Ariel acted quickly, ordering their immediate transport to the Academy's high-end medical wing. With a snap of her fingers, protective barriers enveloped the victims. Yet, Gray felt an eerie chill. The liquidator was missing. This was the site of a massacre that claimed tens of thousands in his past life. Something felt terribly wrong. He remembered the great calamity, a miasma rising from the earth. Ariel noticed his face pale as the realization hit him. Bella watched him too. Gray narrowed his eyes at the floor. Something is beneath us. Hidden passages leading into the deep. Professor Ariel scanned the area. Amidst the bloodstains and grime, her mystic eye suddenly pulsed, unveiling a hidden path. Approaching the spot, she knelt to inspect the earth. Faint residues of short-range teleportation magic still lingered in the air. She realized it was a sealed dimension, accessible only through high-level spatial teleportation magic. The mana trail indicated a distance of 300 meters. Gray watched her, wondering if they could bridge the gap. I can open a path, she declared. Channeling her mana, an intricate magic circle ignited beneath their feet. Failure meant being buried alive in solid earth. Yet, as the gate stabilized, their jaws dropped at the revelation. A sprawling subterranean city stretched before them. Who could imagine such a massive civilization hidden beneath the facility? Tremendous ether waves radiated from the structures. Bella pointed toward one building where the energy felt truly overwhelming. Within the simple circular structure, Ariel sensed something beyond ether. A more sinister, ancient power was seeping through. The magnitude was unprecedented. Gray's eyes narrowed in recognition. Ariel nodded grimly. It is the liquidator's power. Stepping inside, Gray and Bella navigated a desolate hallway. The aura emanated from behind a solitary, imposing door. The liquidator was absent. Ariel reached for the handle, causing Bella to flinch, fearing they were disturbing a sleeping god. Relax, Ariel calmed her. This door is merely a ritualistic symbol. The real threat lies in the surrounding mechanisms. The magic rig surged with light, ensnaring Ariel at the epicenter. Gray cried out, fearing she was in danger. Panic flared. Was she summoning the liquidator? Sensing the volatile mana, Bella urged them to terminate the process immediately. Patience, Ariel commanded. Her calculations proved this rudimentary setup lacked the power to summon a true liquidator. Cracks spider-webbed across the door as an abyss of darkness leaked out. Gray watched, terrified the fabric of reality was tearing. Bella's scream was cut short as the mana dissipated. While the two stood baffled, everything went according to Ariel's design. These weren't summoning circles. They were mere straws, punching a hole through dimensions to siphon the liquidator's excess power. To crystallize such power, the price was blood. Ariel sensed the remnants of 10 human souls consumed by the core. The forging process likely required even more. The captives they saw earlier were nothing more than raw materials for this horror. Bella shuddered. Why commit such atrocities for power? What could they possibly be planning to do with it? Vian's devastating black flames were likely fueled by these crystals, the cursed byproduct of this soul-harvesting ritual. But the catalyst's potential wasn't limited to fire. Mass production of such a substance would spell doom for the world. As the door's fractures healed, Gray questioned if Vian's goal was ever truly about summoning the liquidator. Ariel sighed. Whether it was a lack of intent or ability, these rigs were already pushed beyond their breaking point. Bella marveled at the machinery. Never had she witnessed spatial warp technology with such terrifying precision and output. A single rig costs a nation's fortune, Ariel noted. To possess 8, only one organization has that kind of capital. Bella suspected the Discar Empire, but Ariel shook her head. Even an empire lacked the sophisticated research for this. Then who? Bella asked. Ariel's mind turned toward an entity whose magical prowess dwarfed entire nations. The World Union Academy, Gray muttered. Bella's eyes widened in disbelief, but Ariel confirmed his grim suspicion. No other institution possessed the budget or the intellect for this. A heavy, suffocating silence fell upon the trio. Bella struggled to process the truth. Wasn't the Academy supposed to be humanity's ultimate shield against world threats? Ariel understood her denial. Yet, in this world, no other group wielded such absolute, terrifying authority and resources. It doesn't mean they're all evil, Gray countered. He still believed the majority of the Academy stood for justice. In his past life, the Academy's elites were heroes who died on the front lines protecting the innocent. He couldn't brand them enemies after witnessing their sacrifice. Ariel agreed, noting the situation was far more complex. Most members served humanity faithfully. But within such a vast organization, dark secrets could easily be buried. Nobody truly saw the whole picture. It was clear now Vian was merely a pawn for a much larger shadow. Vian lacked the status for this alone. Bella realized with a chill that the Academy could no longer be trusted. Having lived within those walls for decades, Ariel knew better. Blind trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. Most believed they were saviors. Even the architects of these horrors likely convinced themselves it was for the greater good. The truth is buried deep, she sighed. Gray pressed her, desperate for any lead to the ultimate mastermind. The evidence was scrubbed clean. Suddenly, a violent explosion rocked the facility. It was a trap. They were lured here. Her eyes scanned the void, finding zero traces. A flawless cover-up. Suddenly, a thunderous blast roared. They had been lured into a lethal detonation. Bella shrieked that logic didn't matter, they had to flee. Yet, Professor Ariel remained unshaken, commanding her to stay calm. It was only basic mana explosives. She scoffed that World Union Academy elites were far too powerful to perish from such a petty trap. Thanks for witnessing this epic tale. Check out our next power scaling video, and I will see you in the next chapter. Want to join our ranks? Become a Summon Club member today. Your likes and support keep this legendary journey alive. Stay awesome.